Starting a podcast doesn't have to be difficult. That is why the Life and Business Trailblazer podcast has collaborated with my girl, Yana, the president of Levels to Launch, which offers comprehensive podcast launch services for individuals and businesses. Her motto is, we help you find your voice, shape your message, and level up your brand by leveraging the power of podcasting. Details for this offer will be in the show notes. Levels to Launch. Hello everybody, welcome to another episode here at the Life and Business Podcast. I am so excited that you're here. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, my name is Daniela G. And today I am very excited. I have a wonderful guest, Mr. LeRon L. Barton, who is so awesome in all his right. And today's conversation is going to be a little bit different than the topics that we typically cover in the podcast. We are going to be addressing race, mass incarceration, politics, and writing. So, LeRon, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it, and I'm excited to be on today.
Awesome sauce. Now, before we dive into the main conversation for today, I want to loosen you up just a little bit. So I'm going to ask you a podcast guest engagement question. So the question for today is, if you had a superpower, if you could have a superpower, what would it be and why?
Man, this is such an interesting question. Like, I always think of two things, but it's like but it's like I'll be aside. Like, I like to fly. Like, I like to be free. I sometimes like look at the birds and just how they're able to just sort of float through the world and just sort of catch air. And it's funny because I have a really bad fear of heights, but it's just I just feel like flying is something really lyrical and really beautiful about it, I mean, like, as far as like birds and other animals to fly, I mean, like one of my favorite animals is penguins, and they can fly and swim, and it's just like, man, like, just to be able to just fly would just be pretty incredible.
Awesome. Like, I'm also very afraid of heights as well. I fly by choice, but I think for me it's just like I don't do heights. If I have to, I will, but I'll be screaming all the way to the top. And so I feel for me, if I had a superpower, I would love to have the ability to teleport anywhere. Yeah, because walking sucks sometimes, and driving from place A to place B is not always the funnest. So for me, if I had a superpower, I would love to teleport just anywhere, back to the future, back to the past, in the future, to work, to my car. I would love to have the ability to do that.
Oh my God, like, to be able to time travel.
Oh, man.
For me, like, I've always said this, that I want to live forever. Like, yeah. I don't want to miss anything. Like, like, can you imagine, like, there's going to be several iterations of the iPhone, and it's going to be just like all this technology that, we're going to miss out on. And I'm just kind of bummed by that. But, just to see everything, I think that would be, if I can, honestly, yeah, like, to live forever. But at the same time, you would like outlive, your relatives, and it just,
Yeah. No, I feel for me, if I could live forever, it would definitely be a beautiful thing. I once heard people say that, like, when you die, you don't truly die because your spirit is still here. And so we're not here in the physical sense, but in the spiritual sense, we're still existing. And so I don't know, like, I don't want to experience that just yet, but I feel like the idea and the thought of knowing that, it's just reassuring, right? And so
absolutely.
Yep. And so it's like when we think about all of our ancestors who have passed away, their spirit is still here. Now, do we know how to tap into that spirit is the question. I think many of us don't know how to do that, but I feel that they're with us and they'll continue to be with us. And then once we expire, our spirit will be here, and then we'll see, like the future generation grow and expand. And so it's a beautiful thing to kind of witness and experience that. So when my time comes, I'll experience that. But for the now, I feel that it's very reassuring to know that our ancestors are here with us today.
Right.
Yeah. So awesome. Great conversation. So, all right, let me go ahead and jump into reading your bio. So LeRon L. Barton is a writer from Kansas City, Missouri, currently living in San Francisco, California, a graduate of, is it Paseo Academy?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Paseo Academy of Fine Arts.
Awesome. And so LeRon is also the author of 2 books, Straight Dope, a 360-degree look into American drug culture, and All We Really Need Is Love, stories of dating, relationships, heartbreak, and marriage. In addition to the books, LeRon is an essayist whose topics cover racism, mass incarceration, politics, gender, and dating. These works have appeared in Black Enterprise, Salon, The Good Men Project, Your Tango, Media Diversity, Raconteur, Elephant Journal, East Bay Times, and MoAD. As a young man, LeRon has had to live with a stutter. At times, it was debilitating and confidence hindering, but he has learned to manage the stutter and not let it stop him from taking on another passion, public speaking. LeRon has also given talks and speeches at TEDx Wilson Park about overcoming the fear of stuttering, University of San Francisco on Black and Asian solidarity, Glide Methodist Church on collective liberation, been a guest on Al Jazeera's The Stream, StoryCorp, Dr. Vibes' Do You Know What Time It Is podcast, and has participated in panel discussions on race and prison recidivism. In his spare time, LeRon mentors young men in San Francisco and loves to backpack around the world. What an amazing bio. You are just such a brilliant individual. I also love to write, and I'm also slowly getting into the public speaking arena. And as someone who suffers from like social anxiety that really impedes my speech, I definitely relate to what it feels like. And so that's the reason why I wanted you on this podcast to really talk about just different things that are really important in today's culture and climate. And so just to kind of give a little bit of backstory, I'm actually from St. Louis, Missouri. So I was born in Haiti. Yeah, I was born in Haiti, and then I was raised in St. Louis, Missouri. So it's really interesting to see people not too far removed from where I'm from.
Sure.
Yeah, awesome. All right, so let's go ahead and dive right into our topic for today. Now, I just had the opportunity of reading your bio, and so we've understood and heard of the different accomplishments that you have reached and earned. But tell us a little bit more about who you are. What gets you up in the morning, and how do you forge a new trail on a daily or yearly basis?
Well, thank you for that introduction. Like, it's always interesting to hear your bio, right? Because it's like, oh man, I've done this, I've done that. What gets me up, to be honest with you, is it is trying to create something different, trying to create something new. Like, I always say, every day is another chance to make it right, right? It's another chance to get it right. And so I'm always fascinated by creating new projects, by learning, by having great conversations, and to really elevate different voices. A lot of my work has to do with race, this form of racism, white supremacy. Talking about the effects on race with African American people, specifically Black boys. I am very passionate about mass incarceration because I do feel like that it is 21st century slavery, and I do feel that that it is an incredibly important part of our lives, and that it needs to be discussed. Too many people kind of treat mass incarceration as long as it's not seen, it's not a problem, or they treat it like, okay, well, it's your fault you got locked up, when we never really look at the conditions that are created, that I'm not going to say allows, but that has people make the decisions that they make. So yeah, that's what kind of gets me up. Like I want to be able to make my mark and to also help with change, or at least illuminate people's minds and give them ideas on how to change.
I love that. Wow. I love how you say that for each day it's another opportunity for you. And I love how you
Absolutely.
use the adjective illuminate, right? It's really your opportunity to show the world who you are, and to also display the various gifts that only you possess. I believe that I believe that as afraid as we can be about the idea of something, there is something inside of us that we can only share with the world. Like no one else has that talent, no one else has that skill. So if we are given the opportunity to wake up every single day and keep showing up and keep doing it, I feel that we should do the thing that we were called to do. A lot of people can't find what that is specifically, but I feel that there is something inside of each and every one of us that only that individual can kind of share and showcase that skill or talent with the world. Only that person.
I agree. I mean, I feel like that, as a writer, it's that's God given, right? So this is what God has put me on the planet to do. Like, I remember, like, when I was with my lady a couple years ago, it was like my 39th birthday, and I, not to date myself, but I said to her, I was like, babe, I finally know what I'm put on this planet to do, and that is to create stories, to write stories, to create content that's going to entertain as well as to edify people. And the subjects that I take on, they can be tough, but like not everything's like rainbows and sunshine. Like we need to talk about the tough stuff, and so this is why I write the way that I write.
Yeah. And I feel like too, a lot of people are afraid of having those tough conversations. They would prefer
Which is sad, right?
to address, right? It's like they would prefer to address the easy conversations, but what truly matters is what they're turning their backs on. And so we're going to dive into that a little bit more into the conversation. And so I'm really excited to just be educated, because I definitely need to do my homework, but I feel that I'm always a student of life, and so I really enjoy learning, and so definitely looking forward to our conversation a little bit today.
Definitely.
So, all right. So let's kind of build on this conversation that we started by switching gears and talking a little bit more about your writing. So you're an author, an essayist, writer. Where does your creativity come from? What inspires you? And what is the message that you want your writing to convey to anyone who reads it?
Right. So, that's a really good question, bro. Man, these are awesome questions.
Yeah.
What inspires me is life. What inspires me is telling a story that does not get told very often. Like, for example, I do a lot of writing about the black male in America, right? And so I feel that a lot of our story is not told because we're not understood, we're demonized, and we are ignored. And so I try to humanize us in any way that I possibly can, because society looks at us as demons. And so I try to make sure, hey, we are full-bodied people, and as far as I'm sorry, what was the other part of the question? I'm sorry.
Yep, so it's where does your creativity come from, And what inspires you, and what is the message that you want your writings to convey to anyone who reads it?
You know, I as far as inspiration, life inspires me. I mean, like one thing that I love to do is I love to read a great a great piece. You know, one thing one thing I love to do is to read a fantastic hear a fantastic podcast. You know, I was thinking about something the other day. I was like, the podcast Gangsters Capital, and it was about the college admission scandal. I was like, man, this was a really phenomenal piece of work.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that inspires me. It's like other writers doing great things.
Yeah.
People like Michelle Alexander,
mm-hmm.
people like Dr. Tommy Curry. They're really kind of like pushing the needle. Things inspire me, such as seeing other people really doing some great stuff. I mean, one of my heroes is Soledad O'Brien.
Mm-hmm.
I think that her journalism is fantastic. Like, it's just, she's ferocious, and she's smart, and she's sharp. I love Lisa Lane. I love that sort of that investigative stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I read a piece. I was reading a piece last week about queer, gay, and Latino men who are being targeted with meth by older. Stories that you don't hear very often, and I thought that it was so good because it showed that this is not something that we're just kind of imagining. Like, this is real stuff. And so I just that kind of stuff really, like, when I hear it, like, when I read a great piece of journalism, or a great op-ed, or when I hear a podcast, when I read a book, it just makes me be like, man, like, I want to put something down. I want to try to compete with that, like,
Mm-hmm.
because I think that as a writer, you have to read writers, right? I mean, like, writers write, and writers also read too. And so I believe that when you do that, it just makes you want to write. Like, I bet that let's say, like, Kevin Durant is like he's probably, in my opinion, he's probably the best player right now, but he's not playing right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I bet that Kevin Durant's sitting on the sideline, and he's watching these players play, and he's like, man, like, I just want to just get down, and I just want to I just want to play. So you can get inspiration anywhere.
Yeah. No. Yeah. And I definitely agree with your sentiment and response that life inspires you. I feel like life is one of the best wisdom shapers that I've experienced, because our experiences help drive our perspective and who we are as people. And I love how, with your response, your writing is reflective of the Black man experience. And I will have to agree with you that, yes, I feel that Black men are dehumanized. Anytime that you hear of some kind of shooting, most likely is going to be of a Black man who appeared to be a physical threat, but was not a threat because the individual didn't have any kind of weapon, right? So it's very interesting, and I feel that this shows your authenticity and your genuineness in wanting to use your talent and your gift to convey a message that is truly important for all the masses to hear.
Well, yeah, I mean, I feel like that, I could write about anything, right? Like, the stuff that I write about I mean, look, talking about the plight of the Black man, I'm gonna be writing a piece this year on how Black men are just not able to be seen as victims, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of stuff is not popular. Like, it's not something that people are sort of dying to read, or they can't wait to share.
Yeah.
Because because the fact that we're just like, we're not that sort of that identity that people really care about. Now, mind you, I write about all kinds of black folks, right? I don't spread like, look, when I say I love black people, I love black people, right?
Yeah.
But I have to lean towards black men because for two reasons. First off, that's who I am. I something like the Spike Lee once said, and I'll never forget this because it's one of the most important pieces of advice I ever received. He said, "Write what you know." Right? Mm-hmm. And so I'm gonna write what I know is this intimately because I'm that. And two, it's not just for me. Like I have nephews. I used to be a mentor. I teach creative writing twice a month in the San Francisco County Jail. So I'm also doing this to lift us up, because if you go on Twitter, again, society has a very negative view of us. So I'm doing what I can to counteract that.
And actually, I was reading one of your pieces on your website last week, and it was an excerpt from your book. And let me actually pull up the book name, and it's the Straight Dope, a 360-degree look into American drug culture. And so I found it very interesting how you kind of start the book off by talking about how you were in high school and you left because you wanted to work, and you went to some kind of organization that's probably in the area that you were in at the time. And pretty much a lot of people just go there to find like menial work.
Yeah.
And so
menial labor, right?
Yep. And so you went there and you found a job that was just like torture. And you were being underpaid.
It was horrible.
Yeah, you were being underpaid, and the individuals who were offering you and another person a ride were actually crackheads. And so they actually were smoking, I think, when they delivered you and the other individual to the work location. And so ever since then, you were kind of like, this is not the life that I want. And you changed that. So I find it very, very interesting that you share a very personal experience that's real, that happened to you. Let's think about all the people who are experiencing some very real, raw life experiences, but they don't have the ability to actually talk about it.
Well, thank you for highlighting that. For me, like, one of my greatest strengths is to, sort of share my life experiences.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is like, I don't shy away from, sharing like the good and the bad, right? Because there's a lot of stuff that has happened in my life, and one of the things is that I talk about, I've been to jail. I didn't want to go to school. In my book, Straight Dope, I touched on the fact that, I was starting down a road to getting addicted to promethazine, or, what you would call syrup, cough syrup.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, these things happen. Like, my TEDx, I talked about, the struggles of my stutter, and so the reason why that I do that is because I think these are really interesting stories, right?
Yeah.
And B, I just want people to know that, hey, you know what, I was there. So again, it's like what one of the things like that I love about my lady so much is like she gives me a lot of knowledge, and she's really helped me to realize this phrase of like be of service, right?
Mm.
And so yeah, I want to be known as a great writer, but it's more than
right.
We'll like hit somebody over the head and be like, hey, you know what, you're not the only one. LeRon has went through this too, and so I don't mind sharing that story that you brought up, because it was such a pivotal point in my life. Like, a lot of people, and I'm lucky that I was able to go to school. A lot of us, just a lot of people in general, just this is a total like race neutral thing, but a lot of people in general cannot afford to go to school. And so I realized that at that point in my life, this was the only way that I was going to break out of poverty. And it was one of the greatest decisions I've ever made in my life because, it changed my trajectory.
Yeah. Let's face it, we've all been there where we're unsatisfied with our current job and just want to grow, or we feel that we're not the best interviewees. That's the reason why Legacy Republics exist. Legacy Republic is a premier resume writing and interview coaching service that helps you in amplifying your hidden professional skills. It's all about the words you use and how you show up as your best self. Don't get stuck with submitting an incomplete resume or going into an interview unprepared. Visit www.legacyrepublicwithak.com for a consultation today. Yeah. Wow. I just love authentic stories and just transparency when it comes to life, because I feel that the more that we're able to relate to each other, the better our connection, right? And we all know that we need community, because we get so much further when we have a collective of like-minded individuals. And so I just love that about your story. And so we're going to go ahead and dive head first in this conversation about mass incarceration. And so there's an author's name that you referenced earlier, and I recall starting to read her book. And the author is Michelle Alexander, and she has a wonderful, renowned book that is titled The New Jim Crow, Mass Incarceration in the Age of Color Blindness. And so this book just addresses the business of mass incarceration and how this system is really set up to break and dehumanize the black man. That something so little, so minor, can be amplified as something so major and could cause a black man the rest of his life behind bars. And so let's just talk about mass incarceration and why having this conversation is so important in today's culture.
Well, for me, mass incarceration is So I wrote a piece, one of my favorite pieces that I ever wrote, just off of straight emotion. It was called Musing of Survival, the near inevitability of prison for young black boys. And so the reason why that I wrote that piece is because when you're coming from where you're coming from, like, look, I'm from the ghetto, right? I'm from Southside Kansas City. It's a pretty rough neighborhood, and jail. It's not truly. I mean, it's not 100% inevitable, but you have to work to not get arrested, because there's so many things that society has created to ensnare you to go to jail.
Yeah.
And so, I just knew from an early age that it was a possibility. And being someone that has went to jail, and the fact that reading, just being interested in why is mass incarceration such a profitable business? Why is it such a large force in my community? As I began to read, and I came across Michelle Alexander's book, and it's truly like one of the greatest books I've ever read, because it's so deep. And one of the things that Miss Alexander says is that she says, racism is very dynamic, right? So it constantly bursts. It bursts. So racism is something that changes from generation to generation. So it's like we had slavery, then we had Reconstruction, then we had the Black Codes, then we had the Civil Rights Movement, then we had the war on drugs. Now we have mass incarceration. So it's almost like, well, we can't give you a ticket for being black, so we will give you a ticket for loitering. we can't give you a ticket for being black, so we'll have sundown towns. We can't we can't arrest you for being black, so we'll give you if you have a small iota, a small portion of crack cocaine, your sentence will be 100 times to that of someone possessing cocaine,
Mm-hmm.
because you are black. And so what Miss Alexander does extremely well is just like she shows how much racism hasn't really changed, and just how slavery has like sort of formed into mass incarceration. I learned the term 21st century slavery from a man by the name of Scotty Reed. Scotty Reed is the founder of Black Talk Network. Very intelligent brother. Just, he's really taught me a lot. And so, Miss Alexander's book, she pretty much frames this as, this isn't a thing where. So let me back up. Yvette Carnell of Breaking Brown said something that I'll never forget. She said that when you have numbers of this many numbers of black people being arrested and being incarcerated, that's no longer individual choice.
Mm-hmm.
That's systemic. And so that's what Miss Alexander's book, does better than probably anything that you will read out there. She doesn't go about it from a class angle, and that's one of the things that I've always railed against, right? To me, when you say, "Oh, it's not racist class," that's a coward's argument.
Mm-hmm.
because it's always race, and because the fact that there are more black men in prison in the United States than there are women around the world. Let me repeat that: there are more black men incarcerated. And when I say incarcerated, I mean either behind bars, at home with a house arrest ankle, or as we say on paper, which means probation. They have some form of government incarceration attached to them. Then there are women of all races in the United States, England, India, other countries that are locked up. So what that means is that this is a targeted system to ensnare black men and put them behind bars.
So is there a way that black men can avoid getting or being incarcerated?
Man, wow, that's a really good question. So if we look at the numbers, right? So all right, I'm not in prison, right? I'm not addicted to drugs. I'm doing pretty decent. If we're gonna keep it all the way live, I'm lucky, because the system, the numbers show, again, this isn't an individual choice. This is systemic.
Yeah.
So, I mean, shit, man. Like, Tariq Nasheed once said, you don't have to commit a crime to be convicted of a crime. I mean, we see people like Ronald Cotton, his brother. I forgot what part of the South he's from, but he was charged and convicted of rape of a white woman, because the white woman dreamed that she was raped by him, right? So, I mean, it's honestly, I don't know. Like, when we are such a bottom caste, poor group, right? I mean, I'll never forget this conversation as long as I live. I went to San Quentin to listen to a panel and to sort of participate in a recidivism talk, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was talking to this brother. He was going to be getting out pretty soon. He was like, I don't want to parole back to California. I want to parole to Nevada, because I don't want to be around, my folks. But the parole board won't let me parole to Nevada, so I got to parole home. So what he's telling me, and again, this is what Michelle Alexander's book does so well. she lets you know that it is a system. So check this out. You and I've done a lot. I've done a couple of interviews of people who did time and who were released. So, and this is for people that may not be aware of this. So, you get out of prison, right? All right. So I'm gonna give you $200. That's called gate money. I'm gonna put you on a bus. I'm gonna put you on a train, and I'm going to dump you into the city. Mind you, you only have $200. You only have $200, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't have an ID. You more than likely you don't have contact with your family. If you're lucky to get a place in a halfway house, that's cool. You really can't get a job. It's really hard for you to find an apartment. By the way, these are things that were done due to the crime bill, which Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden co-authored. So you're stuck in a situation where you have no money. You really don't have a lot of money. You don't have a place to stay. You're trying to survive. Oh, by the way, you may have a habit. So what do?
Yeah.
You can either try to grind, stay on the straight and narrow, but again, you're having such a hard time finding a job that more than likely people reoffend, and they are what we call recidivists, and so they're right back inside.
Yeah. And
so this is again. So if you read Michelle Alexander's book, she talks about this, and that's when I like reading her book. Just doing a lot of research just made me realize this is a system. We're all human capital here.
Yeah.
So so to answer your question, how can black men stay out of prison? How can we stay out of jail? Well, we're black, so that's that's just right. We're a man, so we're feared and we are hated. I would just say, go to school, try to keep yourself out of situations, but even that won't help. So again, like, it's the mere inevitability.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it doesn't, like, that's just a tough question that I cannot answer.
Yeah. And I feel like, like when people don't really study like mass incarceration, they really truly don't understand what is happening. Like, in my mind, and based off of like personal experience with a family member, what I see is this: when as it pertains to mass incarceration, you have this system that mentally and emotionally dismantles the black man. It pretty much dismantles his character, his integrity, and everything about his manness. So they spend all this time mostly in social, like away from the social masses. They're in solitary. That's the word I was looking for. And so they lose the ability to connect with other people because they're only seeing one type of species or one type of person, which is just a man. So they are dehumanized. They are taken away from society. They're just put in some kind of box and they're expected to pretty much be normal. Then they're released from prison and they have no sense of direction as to how to reconnect back with society. Because a lot of people who go in, they have these very lengthy sentences, and so their mind and their behavior is only fixed on the time period that they were in before they got incarcerated. So once they come out, all these technologies and different things like change, like the advent of Facebook is presented, and so now they have to reassimilate, but they don't know how. And all they know truly is what they knew before they went into jail. And so if they can't find a job, they're going to go back to selling drugs because that's what was making them a lot of money. So this whole mass incarceration system is not really set up for them to be successful after. It's really set up for them to come back because, again, the individuals who run these prisons are earning so much money and are getting free labor from these black men and just men or women who are incarcerated. So it's a very unfair system. which is why our young black men need to stay away from it, because their freedom is compromised. Then they're pretty much like thrown back into society and expected to thrive, but they can't, because they can't vote. Most of them can't find a job because they have this criminal record. So what are they supposed to do?
Absolutely. I mean, it's like, look, you know, if you think about it, right? I mean, when's the last time you've been back to St. Louis?
Last year in May.
All right. So when you went back, did a lot of it change?
No, it was the same.
All right. So you know, like sometimes when I go back home, you know, I'm like, oh my God, that changed. You know, when did this come up? Oh man, like that closed. Just imagine if you're gone for like a year, 2 years, maybe 5 years, right?
Yeah.
You come back home, you know, stuff is not the same. You know, people have moved on. You're trying to reacclimate, and you know, life in prison life in any type of incarceration is very regimented, right? You know, you have rules. You know when to sleep, when to shower, when to do whatever. You're let out into the world with very little resources. Well, as you said, you're bound to reoffend, because people are gonna do what they're going to do to survive. And I don't think I think that the way that we look at post mass incarceration is just really pathetic. I mean, like there's no step down method. You know, I mean, there's no reacclimating people back into society, because if you throw somebody right into society like that, it's gonna be a shock.
Yeah.
It's like going to a foreign country. It's gonna be a culture shock, right? So you're gonna be like, whoa, what's going on? What is this? I don't know how to speak the language. Like, come on. I mean, that's again going back to Miss Alexander's book. It talks about how this is just a system that's just designed to just keep people coming back in. And it truly is the new Jim Crow. And as I said, the majority of the people incarcerated are black men. So this is not by accident. This is by design.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, you know, it's crazy. So people, when you hear about voting, right? People will say, "Oh my God, black women voted. You know, like the black woman votes. She's the most loyal voter." Well, you know why, right? Because generations of black men can't vote.
Yeah.
They're gone, or they've had their voting rights stripped because of mass incarceration, because of the war on drugs, because of people like Joe Biden. That's what happens.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the current political standing in mass incarceration.
You know, for me, so I posted something on Facebook weeks ago, and matter of fact, I'm sorry, it wasn't weeks ago. It was maybe a week or two ago, and I said, and I listed all the reasons why that I wouldn't vote for him. And I said, you know, one thing you have to understand about the 1994 crime bill is that decimated Black America. Like, this thing, it started the crack cocaine disparity sentencing, which is arguably the most racist I've ever seen in my life. And for those that don't know what that means, that means that you have to have 100 times the amount of cocaine. You will get sentenced the same if you had one time the amount of crack cocaine.
Mm-hmm.
Who has crack on the person more, right?
Mm-hmm.
Black people, Latinos. Who's more likely going to have cocaine? White folks, right? Two, what it did was it stopped people who are felons from getting public housing. That's very important.
Mm-hmm.
It stopped them from being able to get things like food stamps, from stop them from being able to get welfare, right? So people's you're taking away so many things that people may need at one point in their life to survive. It's given us the three strikes law, which is extremely racist, right? I mean, these are things that are created to house people. You know what I mean? It's stop it stopped felons and prisoners from being able to get Pell Grants, from being able to get types of financial aid.
Yeah.
So again, Joe Biden did this, right? Specifically targeting a certain type of people. And so as someone who, not only as a black man, but as someone who is passionate about mass incarceration, someone who volunteers, like, I don't get paid to teach creative writing in the jails. I do that because I want to make a difference. There's no way in hell, and I'm sorry, excuse my language, but there's just no way that I can sit across my students and teach them and help them try to get a voice, and then know that I voted for a man who has created policies that have made it harder for them to rehabilitate, that may have put them there. It doesn't work. And you can tell yourself, like, look, and I said this to on my Facebook to black folks. You know what? You can tell yourself anything you want to tell yourself to justify that vote, but understand he is responsible for black men not being for black men not being in the home. That's Joe Biden.
So when we talk about race, right, we can really go down a rabbit hole of interesting conversations, and we're fully aware of how race has affected our ability as African American people to propel and move up the ladder, if you will. And so I remember when I was in college, I started reading this book about redlining, which is essentially where different states and the government only allocate a specific part of the city to blacks only. And so they kind of segregate them or separate them from white people. St. Louis, Missouri is actually a city that has done that, where they have allocated like a specific county just for African American people, and then all the whites would just stay in the suburbs. And so race has everything to do with that. And so just kind of break that down for us, like why should we learn and understand how important race is, and how can we actually like learn or fight for what is right, if you will.
Okay. Well, first off, this interview is awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
You've done a fantastic job. So you should be applauded.
Thank you.
For me, race is the single biggest factor in life. Period. Mm-hmm. More than anything, look, I'm a race first guy. I don't hide that. If you read in my writings, race is the biggest, most important factor in your entire life. I've said this before. When I walk in a room, I don't want people to see me as a man. I don't want people to see me as a writer. I want people people will see me as a black person first. More than anything, I'm black first. I lead with that, right? And so the reason why that you need to learn about race is because that will teach you how the world is, why it is set up the way it is, why there's such a huge racial wealth gap, why black people have been in the bottom. I'm sorry, on the bottom for so long. You will learn about all the things that we have fought for. I mean, just things that you and I will call privileges, but are really just basic human rights. Mm-hmm. That's what we will fight for. You will learn why black areas have been are just concentrated just with specifically with us, and why segregation is such an important factor.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned redlining. The government had a part in redlining. The government, look. So when people coming back from, believe, World War I, World War II, when they were given access to the GI Bill, black soldiers were not able to access their GI Bill.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a thing called white flight. This is how the suburbs were built, because many people with their GI Bills, or black folks who were ran out of town, which was a fairly often occurrence, white folks fled them areas or made them areas all white. There's a reason why Portland, from what I've been told, I've never been there, but there's a reason why Portland is just an incredibly white identified, just white populated city, because it was, from what I've been told, it was illegal for black folks to live there. So this is why race is important. It's very important to understand why companies like Facebook and Google have 2-3% black folks. It's important to know why. It's important to know about race when you have black people getting higher interest rates on loans, or just being denied loans at all.
Yeah. It's
very important to know about race, because then you will understand, okay, this is why we have PWIs, which is predominantly white institutions. This is why some black folks just opt to just go to HBCUs. So if you don't understand race, and if you don't understand its place in society and how it affects everything, you can't adopt a class based mindset solution. You can't adopt a race neutral solution in a race based country. And so, a lot of black folks, we want to run away from race because, look, who wants to be black, right? Being black, that means that you are the most hated, you are the most targeted, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, we tend to, run away from that. We like to say, oh, well, I don't see no color. Barack Obama was the president, but race still matters. So, and it will always matter.
Yeah. So deep. I love it. Thank you. Wow. Awesome stuff. And so now we're going to actually head into a segment of our show that is called Inspiration Avenue. And so after everything that we've talked about today, I feel so inspired to read more books on race, mass incarceration, and just how it really affects our ability just to move and be successful as African American people. So now is your opportunity to share a quote or adage that has resonated with you in your life, and then you'll share why this quote or adage was impactful.
Wow. There's some proper preparation prevents poor performance. That's one of my favorites. I believe that with anything, I'm pretty sure you would agree. Being a student, you have to study and you have to prepare for tests, right?
Yeah.
There's something like that. Boxers always say something like that. Something to the effect of 90% of the fight is won in the gym, and 10% of it is when you're fighting your opponent. So, when every time that I've done a speech or I've come to just say a debate or a talk, or just when I went to write something, I've always made sure that I am prepared, because when you're prepared, the execution is easy. It's second nature. It's like okay, I got this.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say proper preparation prevents poor performance, and also something that Malcolm X always said, like, make a plan. Whenever I'm writing something, I don't use big words. There's really no reason to. Like I think that I like to call them like 25-cent words and SAT words. I think they sound great. Like I may use them on occasion, but when I'm trying to get my point across, I'm just going to use plain speak, because my mother's the best communicator I know, right?
Yeah.
And she talks in a very plain way. Malcolm X is my hero. He talks in a very plain way. I always felt like the best communicators are those that anyone can understand.
Mm-hmm.
And so as long as you're just direct and you just make it plain, you should be good. I mean, using like flashy words of the day, I mean, it sounds good, but if don't nobody know what you're talking about, you kind of fail.
Yeah. I love that quote, and I am just so grateful that you were able to bless us with your wisdom and your knowledge about these very important topics. And so before I let you go officially, I would love for you to talk about any projects that you have coming up, and just share information on where our listeners can actually follow you or follow your work.
Yes, ma'am. So I'm at www.LeRonBarton.com. I'm on Twitter at MainlineLeRon. I'm always looking for a great conversation. Let's just keep the nastrand at a minimum of 0. As far as what I'm working on, this year I'm going to shoot a short, which is going to be really cool. I'm going to be writing a piece on Joe Biden's stutter. I feel that look, I'm not a fan of Joe Biden, but I feel that when you attack a man because of his speech disability, I just think that's just so cheap, and it just kind of reeks of lack of character. I mean, there's so many things to criticize Joe Biden on. I mean, criticize him on his policy, on his record, the way that he interacts with women, but to criticize him because he stutters, that's just corny. That doesn't make any sense. There've been too many incredibly intelligent and impactful people that stutter. So, and I'm gonna write something about interracial dating. I think it's gonna be really interesting. I'm just gonna be talking about how we need to think about when you date, it's not just because you like somebody. There's other things to factor in. So I'm gonna be writing that, and I'm hoping that when it gets published, I'm hoping that people will get a kick out of it. So
yeah, awesome, and I'll certainly be sharing your information in this posting, so you don't have to worry about that. And definitely looking forward to engaging and speaking with you more, just learning, right? Just learning. And so when it comes to the Life in Business Trailblazer podcast, you can find us on Instagram at THE, L as in Larry, B as in boy, Trailblazer. If you want to hear conversations on specific topics, then you can certainly email us at the lbtrailblazerpod@gmail.com, and we are also on Facebook under the same moniker. So until next time, guys, conquer, forge new trails.